In this walkthrough, I'm going to show you how to incorporate changes from the main repository for the Java OO exercises into your own repository. So what I mean by that is when you first set this up, you came to this page, you came to the LaunchCode Education account on GitHub, and you were on the Java OO exercises page, and you created a fork. That fork, recall, made a copy of this entire repository underneath your own GitHub profile. So that was a snapshot. That was a copy of the state of this code as it existed when you hit the fork button. Occasionally we're going to add code or maybe tweak things as we go along, and we'll want you to be able to get those additions or tweaks in your own copy, and that requires a little bit of work. So to do that, let's go back to Eclipse. And within Eclipse here, I need to first just be able to tell Eclipse about this repository so it knows where it lives and knows that it can pull in code from this particular repository. So to do that, I need to open up a new view, go to Window, Show View, and Other. And these views are just these little windows or panes that hang out within Eclipse that we can close or open up. So there's one in particular specifically for viewing Git repositories. So it's underneath the Git folder. It's called Git Repositories. We hit OK, and this will show us the Git repositories that we have set up. Okay, so expand this top level arrow, and you'll see a bunch of different information about the structure of the Git repository. If I go down to remotes and expand that, I see just one thing. I see origin. So what this is recall that the way Git works is it keeps a repository on your computer locally. That just means on your laptop you have a full-fledged Git repository, and when you commit code, it goes into that local repository on your laptop. If you then want it to show up on GitHub, you have to push it. So when you push it, you have to tell Git where to actually push it to. So when we've done this at the command line, we've done things like git, push, origin, master, right? So you just kind of did this and maybe didn't have a clear picture for what was going on. What that said was, Git, please push the code to the origin repository and use the master branch. So the master branch is the branch we're typically working with in all of our work here, with a few exceptions. And origin is the remote version of the repository. It's the one that's up on GitHub. It's the one that you see when you go to github.com underneath your profile. So we've been doing this pushing to the origin quite a bit. We didn't quite necessarily always talk about it this way or have a clear picture of what that meant, but the origin is just that remote repository that lives outside of your computer. We need to set up a new remote repository that corresponds to this one right here, the LaunchCode Education version on github.com. Okay, so we're just going to do that. We're going to go down to remotes, right click and say create remote. And we want to configure this to fetch from the remote. We're not going to be pushing code into this. You're not going to be able to. You're not going to have the right permissions because you're not authorized to do so. But you can pull code from it. You can fetch code from it. So configure fetch. Let's just call this LaunchCode. That's going to be the name of our remote, just like origin was the name of our github.com remote under our own profile. We'll hit OK. And now we need to configure the endpoint for this, the URI. So let me hit change. I need to go back to this guy. So I'm on the LaunchCode Education version of this repository. I need to go to clone or download and copy, and then paste that into this URI window. So I think that actually for me happened to be pre-populated. That's just because I've done this before. Yours, when you first pull it up, isn't going to be populated correctly there with the right LaunchCode Education URL. All right, and that's it. Everything else is fine. We just need to hit finish, and then we can save and fetch. Great. So that's just telling us that it found a new master branch at that remote repository. That's good. Okay, so now Eclipse knows about the LaunchCode version of the repository, but it hasn't done anything to pull down new code into our own repository from that new remote. So to do that, we need to come up to our top level here in the Package Explorer, right click, and go to Team and Merge. We want to merge in the new changes from that repository. So here I have LaunchCode/master. All right, so this is the remote version of the master branch that we want to merge code from. Okay, so I just highlight that. This selection down here, commit, means that that Eclipse is going to automatically have Git commit that code locally. All right, so let's hit merge. This is just telling me what it's doing, that it's going to merge code into my local repository from the LaunchCode repository. Hit OK. And now we're good. So what that just did is that pulled down the changes from the LaunchCode repository and merged them into my local repository. These changes are still not up on github.com under my own profile. So that's something that we need to do now. So if we want those to show up under our own profile on github.com, we need to then push. So go to, again, the top version, or top level there, and go to team and push branch master. Okay, and this is just going to bring up this dialog. This is just going to be something we can probably just glance at and make sure everything's correct. It should be, and indeed it is. It says we want to push this to the origin, which you can see nicely at the URL here that this does correspond to the version under the individual profile, not the LaunchCode education profile, just the individual profile, and that should all work. So I hit next. It's going to preview those changes and ask us to confirm them. We hit finish, and it tells us what it just did. And great. So now what I just did there was take the changes that I incorporated locally and push those up to github.com. So you're going to repeat this probably a few times throughout the Java skill track. So revisit this video for instructions. We'll also detail them in a write-up as well.